Funding for this program is brought to you in part by Crowning Touch Senior Moving Services.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Rose Martin, and this is Real Life with Susan Harf, our favorite life coach, who's giving us tips and strategies to navigate those sometimes sticky situations we find ourselves in. So like you, I can't wait to hear what's on her mind today. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Rose. I'm so happy to see you, and I'm thrilled that you joined us as well. So have you ever heard anybody say to you, "You made me feel that way because there's only one way I could have reacted to that"?
Yes, displacing how you feel on someone else because it's their issue and they controlled that.
Yes. And the fact is that there is never one way, only one way that you can react to anything. So I'm going to give you an example.
Okay, I need an example on this one.
I'm going to give you an example. So two people are walking onto a plane, and one of them is saying to themselves, "I hate flying. I hate it even more now. I am afraid. I think this plane might go down, actually. It looks like it's very ominous outside. The clouds are forming. I think there's going to be a snowstorm." That obviously is not happening here, but it could in other parts of the country. "So I think there's going to be a snowstorm, and I'm scared, and I don't really want to go. And you know, I didn't even want to go on this trip anyway. My spouse made me, and I'm so unhappy, and I'm going to be such a nervous wreck this whole plane ride." And there's somebody walking onto the plane at the exact same time, same plane, same flight attendants, same airline, same destination, everything's the same, except that person is saying, "I'm so happy, I'm getting out of this weather. I can't wait to get to Florida. It's going to be so beautiful. I haven't had a vacation in 2 years. So excited, and I'm going to see my family, my friends, go to some restaurants outside, and all is going to be great. Can't wait." Two people on the same jetway going on the same trip, and one is a nervous wreck and one is so happy. So the person who is upset and anxious might say, "Well, how could I act any other way? I'm going on a plane." And the other person who's very happy getting on the plane might be saying to themselves, "How could I not be in a great mood? I'm going on vacation." The same situation, but two completely different reactions.
That makes sense, but yet I think, you know, the first person in the in your scenario is also making it miserable for the other people around him or her who's getting on that plane, right?
Good point.
And the second person is like bringing joy to everybody to say like, "Woohoo, we are on vacation, everybody. Like whatever your problems have been, put it behind you."
Yes, exactly. And the thing is, not only do we make it miserable for everybody else, but we make it more miserable for ourselves. Because then what we do is we tend to blame somebody else for the way that we feel. "You made me go on that trip. I didn't want to go." Or, "You've always reacted that way, and now you're reacting that way now." Almost doesn't leave room for somebody to truly react differently. What if that moment they didn't act the same way that they always did before? But if you're somebody who is predicting the present and the future based on the past, you're already miserable before you start.
But don't we do that out of habit, kind of predict the future based on the experiences we've had in the past? Because that may be all we know, right? It's a safe place to land, no pun intended for the plane, but it's a safe place for us to be because that's been our prior experience.
It is, and it has, and yes, sometimes we do that. But what we're here to say today is that the best indicator of change is the ability to not get mired down in the past and instead make it your business to say every moment is an opportunity for change. Every moment is an opportunity to do it differently. I do think, and sometimes I tell women who are dating men that they can't seem to get past point one with they feel like the person is not for them, but they're trying to make them for them. They're trying to make them different. And I say to them, usually the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior when it's so bad, when the past behavior is nowhere near where you want it to be. However, if you are in a relationship with a coworker or a boss or someone who reports to you, or a love relationship, or with your teenagers or with your young children, if you're in a relationship with anyone, your role is to, one, remember that it can be different now. And the best predictor of that is you to make it different and to say, right now, I'm starting with right now, it's going to be different. So therefore, I'm going to react differently. I don't have to react the same way that I always did, and neither do they. Having said that, I want to talk a little bit about where we get this from, where our perceptions are formed. If we understand and we agree with me now that you don't always have to think what you did. If you start with that supposition and you're willing to go with me and believe me when I say that it can be different, then also I want you to believe that when you're in a relationship, either a personal or professional relationship, you have an obligation to, instead of focusing on that other person, to focus on you behaving to the highest form of yourself. And when you're really focused on that, you're not thinking, there's only one way I could have responded to that, you made me do it. You're thinking about, instead of thinking about the little tiny nuances that they do that you don't like. So the person who reports to me gets things to me too slowly. Instead of focusing on when they do get it to me, it's always right. It's always in its final form. I really like that. Instead of focusing on, he leaves his socks in the middle of the floor every day, but he's really good to me, and he's kind, and he's warm, and he's welcoming, and he's so in love with me, then the socks really don't matter as much. So instead of focusing on the small nuances that drive you crazy about the people who report to you, or your boss, or with your coworkers, or your friends, or your family, what I want people to focus on is, how can I be my best self in this? And you know, there's something else I know about that. Have you ever felt like you were in an audition in a relationship?
Sure.
When people are auditioning, first of all, when you're auditioning somebody else, they know it. They absolutely know you are.
You know, that's true, because we know when we're being auditioned, and we know when someone's kind of giving us that once over to see if we're viable, or we will be appropriate for whatever job or whatever situation they have.
But too often we feel like we're in an audition in a relationship that's ongoing. So with our coworkers, with our boss, with the people who report to us, with our spouses, with our teenagers, with our little ones. If you feel like you are waiting for somebody to get better in order for you to give them your best self, you're going to wait a long time.
Oh, that's what you mean by the audition, waiting?
Yes.
Okay, so I misunderstood. So having it be that we're waiting to, we're like testing someone, or they're testing us.
Or they're testing us,
Okay.
yeah. So the audition part is when you're not giving somebody else your best self because you don't feel they deserve it.
Yeah.
They don't deserve your best yet. But the way to get the best from them is for you to give your best self. Start now. Start now doing that, even before they're giving you their best. I'll tell you another example. One time I was having lunch with a coworker, and there was a gentleman sitting at the next table over, and I sort of, out of the corner of my eye, I recognized that he was there. I knew him, and I didn't like him. I used to work with him, and I found him to be pompous, aggressive, and I didn't like him. And my coworker says, "Oh, look, there's Joe. I want to go say hello to him. You want to go with me?" And I said, "No, that's okay. I'll stay here, and you go say hi." And I witnessed the interaction that she had with him. And she's smiling, and she's gesturing, And he's laughing at her and smiling, and he puts his hand on her hand, and he's just being really warm, and I can kind of hear what he's saying to her, and I'm thinking, this is not the Joe that I know. Right. And I realized that she was bringing out his best self because she was accessing her own. She was giving him her best, her nicest self.
Did you change?
Well, interestingly, I did a little bit. On the way out, I decided to approach him. And I decided, for me, to tell you the truth, it was kind of like a little game because I wasn't convinced that I was going to like him. But I decided...
You weren't even sure you wanted to like him at this point.
Correct. But I decided I can do this. So I walked up to him and I said, hey, how's it going? I haven't seen you in a while. And so we were no longer coworkers with him. He was not working with us anymore. And so I said, how are you? And he said, I'm great. I'm really happy in my new job. And I said, oh, that's so wonderful. I'm really glad to hear that. And he said, well, thank you so much for saying that. He never thanked me once in however many years we worked together.
And it wasn't frosty. I mean, it
was
cordial.
real. It was genuine. And that's the other thing about what I find people doing when they're auditioning somebody for a role in their lives. They're not necessarily authentic. And when we can not only be our highest self in the relationship that we can be, but when we can be authentic with someone, usually our authentic self is a lot better than how you behave when you were auditioning someone.
You know, I think that's true, and I think what you said earlier about people can tell when they're being auditioned.
Yeah,
I also think
of course.
people can tell if you're being genuine and if you're being authentic in your interactions that you have.
They absolutely can. People know when you are holding back. People know how you feel without you telling them how they feel. They can tell by your actions, they can tell by the things you say, by the things that you don't say, your body language. And unfortunately, when we do that, you know that saying and the story about the frog who became the prince after he was kissed?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like that. When you treat somebody as though they're good enough, they become good enough for you. When you want your teenager to start picking up his room and start being a little more cooperative and a little more family-like instead of leading their own life for them, which of course is, the teenage years are all about me, me, me. And when you can you're wanting to cajole them into becoming more of a working member of this family, if you treat them as though they're no good, if you treat them as though they aren't anything, fill in the blank, aren't anything, they're going to show you how lousy they can be.
So they reaffirm that for you.
People always affirm what you think of them. If you think, when I decided that Joe was okay, he showed me he was okay.
Does that hold true for what we think and say to ourselves too?
Very good point, Rose. You're such a good life coach, life strategist. Yes, it absolutely has everything to do with how you feel about yourself. And that leads me to think about something else. When we are children and we are being brought up in our families, I always say that the family of origin is the school you went to learn how to be a human being. And nobody went to Harvard. Okay, so none of our families were perfect. That's what I mean by that. And so growing up, our parents were not perfect. Not one of us is perfect now. So when you were growing up and your parents were doing the best they could, but sometimes they made mistakes or sometimes they said things that were not the most appropriate. So for instance, when I was growing up, we didn't know a lot about the concept that children are not good or bad. The behavior that they can do might be good or bad. So you heard parents in those days, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, you heard parents say, now go to school and be good, or be a good boy, or you were such a good girl today. Even when parents are complimenting their children by saying you were good, it's not as effective as if you say, I love the way you did that, or I like the way you draw, I like the way you study for your exams, I'm really proud of the fact that you choose to put your all into your work. Those are things that are explaining to the child that they're how you feel without saying you're good or bad. So getting back to when a parent says, you were bad in school today, weren't you? I heard from the teacher. Or don't be a bad boy. When parents say that to their children, it's not the best. It's not the best thing to say, because what you're saying to them is, you're bad, you're no good. That's different than saying, I don't like it when you throw your food on the floor, to the 3-year-old or the 2-year-old.
Boy, don't they have to have a lot of self-control at that moment, though, if a 3-year-old is going into a tantrum, or even with teenagers, or even with spouses. For you to think that through ahead of time, not to be so reactionary and be like, oh, I hate that, or that's awful, or why are you doing that? That's bad.
You can be reactionary. You just don't have to say you're bad or good. So you can be reactionary by saying, I'm so angry you did that. I'm not happy right now. That did not make me happy. And with a very stern voice. But what I also want to say is, if you grew up in a home where you were hearing constantly, you're a bad girl, you're a bad boy, sometimes you learn that, and what you learn is not necessarily what the parent meant to evoke or to make you think, but you may believe when you grow up that you aren't good. You aren't good at school. How many times have people said that? I wasn't good at school, or I'm not good at relationships. When people believe that about themselves, it can become like quicksand. It can become something that they're mired down in and they can't get out of. And what I'm here to say is, yes, you can, because instead you can say to yourself, I never learned from my parents how great I really was. But I can change that, and the way I can change it is by telling myself that I'm good. And then I can tell my parent, who never said it to me, that they're good. And further, I can tell my child that they are good. So that's how you break that chain. You break it by not doing the same thing that was done to you, number one. Number two, hardly the way out of the problem is then to do to the person what they did to you. Exactly. So again, if I thought Joe was aggressive with me, or I thought he was not a nice person, the way out of that is not to be miserable to him or mean to him. That's hardly the way out of it. So instead, by me walking over and saying, hi Joe, how you doing? I was giving him my best self. That's the way out of it. The way out of it is to say, I'm going to change. I'm not going to treat them. If I was treated poorly by them or anybody else, I don't need to do that. Secondly, sometimes we believe, the Groucho Marx saying that you don't want to be in a club that would have you as a member. So when people grow up and they think they're no good, or they're no good at school, or they're no good at whatever, then they don't allow for somebody to say, yes, you are. You may not be good in math, but you're really good at drawing. You may not be wonderful at being on time, but you're a great partner in other ways. So in other words, I understand, and you can say to yourself, I understand why I don't draw people to me who tell me that I'm wonderful, because I wasn't told I was wonderful as a child. But beyond that understanding, get going. So I understand that, but that does not mean that you need to continue to draw people to you who are going to tell you the same thing. Instead, it means, hey, wait a minute. I can tell myself, like Rose said, I can tell myself I'm good, and I am. And then I can tell the person I'm with that they're good. And then they're good for me. And then I'm going to draw people to me who I deserve. And who do I deserve? People that are good, because I am. Doesn't matter what your parent told you. It matters to the extent that it helps you figure it out.
And you deserve that for yourself, even to tell those things to yourself. Maybe what you were told as a child wasn't even true.
It usually is
not. And so you telling yourself, I'm starting over. I'm going to start right now, this moment, and kind of erase from my vocabulary, and when I'm telling myself, nothing bad. I'm just going to start off fresh.
Exactly. And when you do that, then what you're doing is you are changing your present and you're changing the future. And you are making true what I told you at the beginning of this half hour, which is you don't always have to respond the same way to the same things. And people don't always have to respond to you the way they may have responded in the past. When you said it probably wasn't true what the parents said to the child when they're saying the wrong thing to them, 99% of the time, that is a reflection. Those comments are a reflection of ignorance, and they're also a reflection of how the parent feels about themselves. And that's what we are left with when we react the wrong way. If we treat somebody poorly because they treated us poorly, when you then come to your coach and say, I hate this situation and what happened, everybody's always talking to me about what they did in the confrontation. They're not saying, yep, the person was mean to me again. They're saying, you won't believe how I acted. I'm so embarrassed. So instead of focusing on other people and their nuances and waiting for them to get better or waiting for the situation to get better, you start out by saying, this is going to be good. I am going to access my highest self. I'm not going to think about that he throws his socks on the floor. I'm going to think about how he cares about how I feel. He cares about what happens to me. He cares about my life. And then suddenly the socks really are not that relevant.
It's like finding something good always.
That's exactly right.
Even on the plane, for her in the plane.
That's exactly right. And not only finding something good, but also focusing on the whole, the totality of the situation. You know, I always say we are constantly in a series of relationships with our environment, with the cashier we meet at the grocery store, with the flight attendant. Even if that relationship is a 1-minute relationship, hello, happy to have you on our airline. That became a relationship at that moment. And so you can decide how you're going to handle that relationship. You don't have to be afraid when you get on the plane if you were afraid yesterday when you got on the plane. And you don't have to focus on somebody else's little nuance that they do, whether it's the person who reports to you or whether it's the person in your family. Instead, focus on the totality of the relationship and focus on yourself. If you focus on, I'm going to be my highest self, I'm going to be the best that I can be today for everybody that I meet, I guarantee you, you will find that you meet a lot of happy people along the way.
And you're going to have a great day, right?
You're going to have a great day.
So I'm curious if you can catch yourself when you're about to go into negative mode, because that's been a habit from the past, and you're like, no, I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to look for something good. I'm going to search deep and far and wide, but I'm not going to go there. So how can people kind of intervene if they're like, I don't know, I can't see anything in here right now, but I know I'm supposed to come up with something good?
Great question. Here's the answer. You got to believe it. You can't just say, well, I'll say something positive. You got to believe that Joe can act differently for you today. You got to believe that when you treat your teenager, even if he's not helping around the house now like he can, you know, you are really good at doing the dishes. I'd love you to do that sometime for me. Is different than, why can't you ever help us? That's a totally different message, completely different message. I know that you can do really well in school. Sometimes those classes are really hard, and they were hard for me too, but I know you can do well because you have done well at times. So you must believe that in order to say it. So that is absolutely the number one way to get out of it. Be authentic, to get out of the negativity. Be authentic, but be authentic in your highest form of you.
How do you convince yourself to change, to give yourself those positive messages? Do you say it in the mirror? Do you just repeat it over and over again while you're in the car? What are some ways that people can do that?
You surround yourself with not only the thoughts that you need to have about yourself that are positive, and tell yourself that you have every right to have a fulfilling life and to have people in your life that you want to be with and who are good for you. But then you also surround yourself with people who feel the same way, and people who are willing to not audition you, but instead they understand how wonderful you are and what a contributor you are and what you're capable of. When you decide, when you make that decision for yourself, you then bring people to you who are going to add to the way you really feel, which is, I'm a good person, and I try and do my best every day, and I don't always do my best, and I'm not perfect, and I make mistakes. One of the people who taught me that was somebody I used to work with who made the biggest mistake of her life. We were on the air together, and she was a sports announcer. And she made a very big mistake in the things that she was saying. And the next day, she went to a nationally syndicated program. And she was a local person, and she knew she was going there. And she said to herself, when we got off the air, she said, I made a really big mistake, but I'm still really good. And I'm still going to get that job, and I'm still going to that job. And had she said to herself, holy cow, I made such a horrible remark today. Well, what she did is she called the game wrong. And it was a really big game. And she said, I can't believe I did that. I was wrong. I made a mistake. But she didn't say, I'm the worst sports announcer known to man, because had she done that, she wouldn't have done well in her new job. And her new job was a bigger, better job. And instead, she went off and did well. So in other words, when you make the mistake, when you're not your best self, that's the real time to say to yourself, I'm still great. I'm still good. I got it.
And we've got it now. So thank you so much. If you have ever thought about making it better for yourself, the ideas, the solutions, it all came together today. Thank you so much for joining us on Real Life. We'll see you again real soon.